George Glenn Jones was an American musician, singer and songwriter who achieved international fame for his long list of hit records, including White Lightning, as well as his distinctive voice and phrasing. For the last 20 years of his life, Jones was frequently referred to as the greatest living country singer. Country music scholar Bill C. Malone writes, "For the 2 or 3 minutes consumed by a song, Jones immerses himself so completely in its lyrics, and in the mood it conveys, that the listener can scarcely avoid becoming similarly involved." Waylon Jennings expressed a similar opinion in his song "It's Alright If We All Could Sound Like We Wanted To, We'd All Sound Like George Jones." The shape of his nose and facial features earned Jones the nickname the Possum. Born in Texas, Jones first heard country music when he was 7 and was given a guitar at the age of 9. He married his first wife, Dorothy Bonvillian, in 1950, and was divorced in 1951. He served in the United States Marine Corps until his discharge in 1953. He married Shirley Ann Corley in 1954. In 1959, Jones released a cover version of White Lightning by J.P. Richardson, which launched his career as a singer. His second marriage ended in divorce in 1968. He married fellow country music singer Tammy Wynette a year later. Many years of alcoholism caused his health to deteriorate severely and led to his missing many performances, earning him the nickname No-Show Jones. After his divorce from Wynette in 1975, Jones married his fourth wife, Nancy Sepulvado, in 1983 and became mostly sober. Jones died in 2013, aged 81, from hypoxic respiratory failure. He was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. During his career, Jones had more than 150 hits, both as a solo artist and in duets with other artists. Life and career. Early years. George Glenn Jones was born on September 12, 1931 in Saratoga, Texas, and was raised in Vida, Texas, with his brother and 5 sisters. His father, George Washington Jones, worked in a shipyard and played harmonica and guitar, while his mother, Clara, played piano in the Pentecostal church on Sundays. During his delivery, one of the doctors dropped Jones and broke his arm. When he was 7, his parents bought a radio and he heard country music for the first time. Jones recalled to Billboard in 2006 that he would lie in bed with his parents on Saturday night listening to the Grand Ole Opry and insist that his mother wake him if he fell asleep so he could hear Roy Acuff or Bill Monroe. In his autobiography I Live to Tell It All, Jones explains that the early death of his sister Ethel spurred on his father's drinking problem and, by all accounts, George Washington Jones could be physically and emotionally abusive to his wife and children when he drank. In the book George Jones, The Life and Times of a Honky-Tonk Legend, Bob Allen recounts how George Esser would return home in the middle of the night with his cronies roaring drunk, wake up a terrified George Jr., and demand that he sing for them or face a beating. In a CMT program on Jones' life, country music historian Robert K. Owerman marveled, "You would think that it would make him not a singer, because it was so abusively thrust on him." But the opposite happened. He became a chronic singer. He became someone who had to sing. In the same program, Jones admitted that he remained ambivalent and resentful towards his father up until the day he died and observed in his autobiography that Jones' family makeup doesn't sit well with liquor. Daddy was an unusual drinker. He drank to excess but never while working, and he probably was the hardest working man I've ever known. His father bought him his first guitar at age 9 and he learned his first chords in songs at church, and there are several photographs of a young George busking on the streets of Beaumont. He left home at 16 and went to Jasper, Texas, where he sang and played on the KTXJ radio station with fellow musician Dalton Henderson. From there, he worked at the KRIC radio station. During one such afternoon show, Jones met his idol, Hank Williams. In the 1989 video documentary Same Old Me, Jones admitted, "I couldn't think or eat nothing unless it was Hank Williams, and I couldn't wait for his next record to come out. He had to be, really, the greatest." He married his first wife Dorothy Bonvillian in 1950, but they divorced in 1951. He was enlisted in the United States Marine Corps until his discharge in 1953. He was stationed in San Jose, California for his entire service. First recordings: Jones married Shirley Ann Corley in 1954. His first record, the self-penned No Money in This Deal, appeared in February 1954 on Starday Records and began the singer's association with producer and mentor H.W. Puppy Daly, and the song was actually cut in Starday Records co-founder Jack Starnes' living room, from whose two names were combined to create the label. Jones also worked at KRTM in Beaumont around this time. DJ Gordon Baxter told Nick Tosches that Jones acquired the nickname Possum while working there. One of the DJs there, Slim Watts, took to calling him George P. Williker Pickuper's Possum Jones. For one thing, he cut his hair short, like a possum's belly. He had a possum's nose and stupid eyes, like a possum. During his early recording sessions, Daly admonished Jones for attempting to sound too much like his heroes Hank Williams and Lefty Frizzle. In later years, Jones would have little good to say about the music production at Starday, recalling to NPR in 1996 that it was a terrible sound. "We recorded in a small living room of a house on a highway near Beaumont. Who could hear the trucks? We had to stop a lot of times because it wasn't soundproof. It was just 8 crates nailed on the wall and the big old semi-trucks would go by and make a lot of noise and we'd have to start over again." Jones' first hit came with Why Baby Why in 1955. That same year, while touring as a cast member of the Louisiana Hayride, Jones met and played shows with Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash. "I didn't get to know him that well," Jones said of Presley to Nick Tosches in 1994. "He stayed pretty much with his friends around him in his dressing room. Nobody seemed to get around him much any length of time to talk to him." Jones would, however, remain a lifelong friend of Johnny Cash. Jones was invited to sing at the Grand Ole Opry in 1956. With Presley's explosion in popularity in 1956, pressure was put on Jones to cut a few rockabilly sides and he reluctantly agreed. His heart was never in it, however, and he quickly regretted the decision. In his autobiography he joked, "During the years, when I've encountered those records, I've used them for frisbees." He explained to Billboard in 2006, "I was desperate. When you're hungry, a poor man with a house full of kids, you're gonna do some things you ordinarily wouldn't do. I said, well, hell, I'll try anything once. I tried Dajimit How Come It and Rock It, a bunch of shit. I didn't want my name on the rock and roll thing, so I told them to put Thumper Jones on it and if it did something, good, if it didn't, hell, I didn't want to be shamed with it." Jones went on to say he unsuccessfully attempted to buy all the masters to keep the cuts from surfacing later, which they did. Jones moved to Mercury in 1957. In early 1957 Jones teamed up with singer Jeanette Hicks, the first of several duet partners he would have over the years, and enjoyed yet another top 10 single with Yearning. Starday Records merged with Mercury that same year, and Jones scored high marks on the charts with his debut Mercury release of Don't Stop the Music. Meanwhile, George was traveling the blacktop roads in a 1940s Packard with his name and phone number emblazoned on the side. Although he was garnering a lot of attention and his singles were making very respectable showings on the charts, Jones was still playing the blood bucket circuit of honky-tonks that dotted the rural countryside. Commercial breakout: in 1959, Jones had his first #1 on the Billboard Country chart with White Lightning, ironically a more authentic rock and roll sound than his half-hearted rockabilly cuts. In the Same Old Me retrospective, Johnny Cash insisted, George Jones would have been a really hot rockabilly artist if he'd approached it from that angle. Well, he was, really, but never got the credit for it. White Lightning was written by J.P. Richardson, better known as the Big Bopper. In I Live to Tell It All, Jones confessed that he showed up for the recording session under the influence of a great deal of alcohol and it took him approximately 80 takes just to record his vocals. To make matters worse, Buddy Killen, who played the upright bass on the recording, was reported as having severely blistered fingers from having to play his bass part 80 times. Killen not only threatened to quit the session, but also threatened to physically harm Jones for the painful consequences of Jones drinking. On the final vocal take used on the recording, Jones slurs the word slug, something he would mimic in live performances of the song. One aspect of Jones' early career that is often overlooked is his success as a songwriter. He wrote or co-wrote many of his biggest hits during this period, several of which have become standards, like The Window Up Above, and Seasons of My Heart. Jones wrote just one more, Life to Go, You Gotta Be My Baby, and Don't Stop the Music on his own, and had a hand in writing Color of the Blues, Tender Years, and Tall Tall Trees. Jones' most frequent songwriting collaborator was his childhood friend Darryl Edwards. Jones signed with United Artists in 1962 and immediately scored one of the biggest hits of his career, She Thinks I Still Care. His voice had grown noticeably deeper during this period, and he began cultivating the singing style that became uniquely his own. During his stint with UA, Jones recorded tribute albums to Hank Williams and Bob Wills and cut an album of duets with Melba Montgomery, including the hit We Must Have Been Out of Our Minds. Jones was also well on his way to gaining a reputation as a notorious hellraiser. In his Rolling Stone tribute, Merle Haggard recalls, I met him at the Blackboard Cafe copyright in Bakersfield, California, which was the place to go in '61. He was already famous for not showing up or showing up drunk, and he showed up drunk. I was on stage, I think I was singing Marty Robbins' Devil Woman, and he kicked the doors of the office open and said, Who the fuck is that? It was one of the greatest compliments of my entire life when George Jones said I was his favorite country singer. In 1967, I released a ballad called I Threw Away the Rose, and he was so impressed he actually jumped ship and left his tour, rented a Learjet and came to Amarillo, Texas. He told me my low note changed his life. He also folded my steel guitarist Fuzzy Owen in a rollaway bed and rolled him out on the street. That was the pinnacle. Former president of Starday Records Don Pierce told director Mark Hall in 1989 another famous story about Jones after Pappy Daly bailed him out of the drunk tank and got him a gig in Houston for $2,500. Your next day Jones came to Daly's office broke again. According to Pierce, an irritated Daly said, Well, George, you just made $2,500, but I talked to some of the guys you were out partying with and they said you went and flushed it down the toilet. Pappy, that's a damn lie. Jones shot back. It wasn't but $1,200. On tour Jones was always backed by the Jones Boys. Like Buck Owens' Buckaroos and Merle Haggard's Strangers, Jones worked with many musicians who were great talents in their own right. These included Dan Schaefer, Hank Singer, Brittany Allen, Sonny Curtis, Kent Goodson, Bobby Burkhead, and Steve Hinson. In the 1980s and 1990s, bass player Ron Gaddis served as the Jones Boys band leader and sang harmony with George in concert. Lorrie Morgan also toured as a backup singer for Jones in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Johnny Paycheck was the Jones Boys bass player in the 1960s before going on to his own stardom in the 1970s. Alcoholism and decline. In 1964, Pappy Daly secured a new contract with Musica Records. For the rest of the 1960s, Jones would only score one number one, but he practically owned the country music charts throughout the decade. Significant hits include Love Bug, Things Have Gone to Pieces, The Race Is On, My Favorite Lies, I'll Share My World With You, Take Me, A Good Year for the Roses, and If My Heart Had Windows. By this point, Jones' singing style had evolved from the full-throated, high lonesome sound of Hank Williams and Roy Acuff on his early Starday records to the more refined, subtle style of Lefty Frizzle. In a 2006 interview with Billboard, Jones acknowledged the fellow Texan's influence on his idiosyncratic phrasing, I got that from Lefty. He always made 5 syllables out of one dang word. Jones' binge drinking and use of amphetamines on the road caught up to him in 1967 and he had to be admitted into a neurological hospital to seek treatment for his drinking. Jones would go to extreme lengths for a drink if the thirst was on him. Perhaps the most famous drinking story concerning Jones occurred while he was married to his second wife Shirley Corley. Jones recalled Shirley making it physically impossible for him to travel to Beaumont, located 8 miles away, to buy liquor. Because Jones would not walk that far, she would hide the keys to each of their cars they owned before leaving. She did not, however, hide the keys to the lawnmower. Upset, Jones walked to the window and looked out over his property. He later described his thoughts in his memoir. There, gleaming in the glow, was that 10-horsepower rotary engine under a seat. A key glistening in the ignition. I imagine the top speed for that old mower was 5 miles per hour. It might have taken an hour and a half or more for me to get to the liquor store, but get there I did. Years later Jones comically mocked the incident by making a cameo in the video for All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight by Hank Williams, Jr. He also parodied the episode in the 1993 video for One More Last Chance by Vince Gill and in his own music video for the single Hunky Tonk Song in 1996. Curiously, in her 1979 autobiography Stand By Your Man, Tammy Wynette claims the incident occurred while she was married to Jones, maintaining that she woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning to find her husband gone. I got into the car and drove to the nearest bar 10 miles away. When I pulled into the parking lot there sat a rider mower right by the entrance. He had driven that mower right down a main highway. He looked up and saw me and said, well, fellas, here she is now. My little wife, I told you she'd come after me. Unregistered trademark. Jones became aware of Tammy Wynette because their tours were booked by the same agency and their paths sometimes crossed after Wynette's first minor hit Apartment No. 9 in 1966. Wynette was married to songwriter Don Chappell, who was also the opening act for her shows at the time. The three became friends but eventually Jones took more than a passing fancy to Wynette, who was 11 years his junior and grew up listening to all of his records. According to his autobiography, Jones went to their house for supper and while she was fixing the meal Wynette and Chappell got into a heated exchange with Chappell calling his wife a son of a bitch. Jones wrote, I felt rage fly all over me. I jumped from my chair, put my hands under the dinner table, and flipped it over. Dishes, utensils, and glasses flew in all directions. Don's and Tammy's eyes got about as big as the flying dinner plates. Jones professed his love for Wynette on the spot and the couple were married in 1969. They began touring together and Jones bought out his contract with Musica so he could record with Tammy and her producer Billy Sherrill on Epic Records. Jones and Wynette became known as Mr. and Mrs. Country Music in the early 1970s, scoring several big hits, including We're Gonna Hold On, Let's Build a World Together, Golden Ring, Near You, and We're Not, The Jet Set. When asked about recording Jones and Wynette, Sherrill told Dan Daly in 2002, it did increase my scotch intake some. We started out trying to record the vocals together, but George drove Tammy crazy with his phrasing. He never, ever did it the same way twice. He could make a 5-syllable word out of church. Finally, Tammy said, record George and let me listen to it, and then do my vocal after we get his on tape. Tammy was a very quick study. In October 1970, shortly after the birth of their only child Amala Georgette, Jones was straitjacketed and committed to a padded cell at the Watson Clinic in Lakeland, Florida after a drunken bender. He was kept there to detoxify for 10 days before being released with a prescription for Librium. Jones managed longer stretches of sobriety with Wynette than he had enjoyed in years but as the decade wore on his drinking and erratic behavior worsened, leading to the couple's divorce in 1976. Jones accepted the responsibility for the failure of the marriage but vehemently denied Wynette's allegations in her autobiography that he beat her and fired a shotgun at her. Remarkably, Jones and Wynette continued playing shows and drawing crowds in the years after their divorce, as fans began to see their songs mirroring their stormy relationship. In 1980, they recorded the album Together Again and scored a hit with Two-Story House. Jones also spoke publicly about his hopes for a reconciliation and would jokingly reference Tammy in some of his songs. During performances of his 1981 hit If Drinkin' Don't Kill Me he would sing Tammy's Memory Will but the recrimination continued unabated. After years of sniping, Jones and Wynette appeared to make peace in the 1990s, recording a final album, One, and even touring together again before Wynette's death in 1998. In 1995 Jones told Country Weekly, like the old saying goes, it takes time to heal things and they've been healed quite a while. Jones' pairing with Billy Sherrill at Epic Records came as a surprise to many. Cheryl and business partner Glenn Sutton are regarded as the defining influences of the countrypolitan sound, a smooth amalgamation of pop and country music that was popular during the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, a far cry from what was George's honky-tonk roots. Despite a shaky start, the success that Cheryl had with Jones proved to be his most enduring. Although Billboard chart statistics show that Cheryl had his biggest commercial successes with artists such as Wynette and Charlie Rich, with Jones Cheryl had his most longest-lasting association. In 1974, they scored a #1 hit with The Door, and followed that in 1975 with a grand tour. Unlike most singers, who might have been overwhelmed by the string arrangements and background vocalists Cheryl sometimes employed on his records, Jones' voice, with its at times frightening intensity and lucid tone, could stand up to anything. While Jones wrote fewer songs himself, songwriters had been tripping over themselves pitching songs to him for years. He still managed to co-write several, such as, What My Woman Can't Do, A Drunk Can't Be a Man, the harrowing I Just Don't Give a Damn, and These Days, which he had written with Wynette. In the late 70s, Jones spiraled out of control. Already drinking constantly, a manager named Shug Baggett introduced him to cocaine before a show because he was too tired to perform. The drug would increase Jones' already considerable paranoia. During one drunken binge he shot at, and very nearly hit, his friend and occasional songwriting partner L. Peanut Montgomery after Montgomery had quit drinking after finding religion. He was often penniless and acknowledged in his autobiography that Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash came to his financial aid during this time. Jones also began missing shows at an alarming rate and lawsuits from promoters started piling up. In 1978, owing Wynette $36,000 in child support and claiming to be $1 million in debt, he filed for bankruptcy. Jones appeared incoherent at times, speaking in quarreling voices that he would later call the Duck, and the Old Man. In his article The Devil and George Jones, Nick Tosches states, by February 1979 he was homeless, deranged, and destitute, living in his car and barely able to digest the junk food on which he subsisted. He weighed under 100 pounds, and his condition was so bad that it took him more than 2 years to complete My Very Special Guests, an album on which Willie Nelson, Linda Ronstadt, Elvis Costello, and other famous fans came to his vocal aid and support. Jones entered Hillcrest Psychiatric Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. Upon his release in January 1980, the first thing he did was pick up a six-pack. Jones often displayed a sheepish, self-deprecating sense of humor regarding his dire financial standing and bad reputation. In June 1979, he appeared with Waylon Jennings on Ralph Emery's syndicated radio program and at one point Jennings cracked, "It's lonely at the top." A laughing Jones replied, "It's lonely at the bottom too. It's real, real lonely, Waylon." Despite his chronic unreliability, Jones was still capable of putting on a captivating live show. On Independence Day, 1976, he appeared at Willie Nelson's 4th of July picnic in Gonzales, Texas in front of 80,000 younger, country rock-oriented fans. A nervous Jones felt out of his comfort zone and nearly bolted from the festival but went on anyway and wound up stealing the show. The Houston Post wrote, "He was the undisputed star of this year's Willie Nelson picnic. One of the greatest." Penthouse called him the spirit of country music, plain and simple, its Holy Ghost. The Village Voice added, as a singer he is as intelligent as they come, and should be considered for a spot in America's all-time top 10. Jones began missing more shows than he made, however, including several highly publicized dates at the Bottom Line Club in New York. Former vice president of CBS Records Rick Blackburn recalls in the 1989 video Same Old Me that the event had been hyped for weeks, with a lot of top press and cast members from Saturday Night Live planning to attend. "We'd made our plans, travel arrangements and so forth. George excused himself from my office, left, and we didn't see him for 3 weeks. He just did not show up." Much like Hank Williams, Jones seemed suspicious of success and furiously despised perceived slights and condescension directed towards the music that he loved so dearly. When he finally played The Bottom Line in 1980, the New York Times called him the finest, most riveting singer in country music. Comeback. By 1980, Jones had not had a #1 single in 6 years and many critics began to write him off. However, the singer stunned the music industry in April when He Stopped Loving Her Today was released and shot to #1 on the country charts, remaining there for 18 weeks. The song was written by Bobby Braddock and Curly Putnam and tells the story of a friend who has never given up on his love. He keeps old letters and photos from back in the day and hangs on to hope that she would come back again. The song reaches its peak in the chorus, revealing that he indeed stopped loving her when he died, and the woman does return €1 for his funeral. In a lesser singer's hands, the song might have sounded corny or even comical, but Jones' interpretation, buoyed by his brilliant delivery of the line, "First time I'd seen him smile in years," gives it a mournful, gripping realism. When it began being played on the radio in the spring of 1980, just about everyone who heard it was floored. It is consistently voted as the greatest country song of all time, along with I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry by Hank Williams and Crazy by Patsy Cline. According to producer Billy Sherrill and Jones himself, the singer hated the song when he first heard it. In Bob Allen's biography of the singer, Sherrill states, he thought it was too long, too sad, too depressing, and that nobody would ever play it. He hated the melody and wouldn't learn it. Sherrill also claims that Jones frustrated him by continually singing the song to the melody of the Chris Christopherson hit Help Me Make It Through the Night. In the Same Old Me retrospective, Sherrill recalls a heated exchange during one recording session. "I said that's not the melody. And he said yeah, but it's a better melody. I said it might be Christopherson would think so too, it's his melody." In the same documentary, Sherrill claims that Jones was in such bad physical shape during this period that the recitation was recorded 18 months after the first verse was, and added that the last words Jones said about He Stopped Loving Her Today was "Nobody by that morbid son of a bitch." A big part of Jones' success over the years was that he could always smell a hit, but this time his instincts were woefully off. Although he had disliked He Stopped Loving Her Today, when it was first offered to him, Jones ultimately gave the song credit for reviving his flagging career, stating that a 4-decade career had been salvaged by a 3-minute song. Jones earned the Grammy Award for Best Male Country Vocal Performance in 1980. The Academy of Country Music awarded the song Single of the Year and Song of the Year in 1980. It also became the Country Music Association's Song of the Year in both 1980 and 1981. The success of He Stopped Loving Her Today led CBS Records to renew Jones' recording contract and sparked new interest in the singer. He was the subject of an hour-and-a-quarter-long HBO television special entitled George Jones, With a Little Help from His Friends, which saw the Painfully One singer performing songs with Waylon Jennings, Elvis Costello, Tanya Tucker, and Tammy Wynette, among others. Jones continued drinking and using cocaine, appearing at various awards shows to accept honors for He Stopped Loving Her Today, obviously inebriated. His condition was readily apparent when he slurred the words to I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool with Barbara Mandrell on a televised broadcast. He was involved in several high-speed car chases with police, which were reported on the national news, and one arrest was filmed by a local TV crew. The video, which is widely available online, offers a glimpse into Jones' Jekyll and Hyde persona when drinking, with the singer looking genuinely frightening as he argues with the police officer and lunges at the cameraman. Conversely, when sober, Jones was known to be friendly and down-to-earth, even shy. In a 1994 article on Jones, Nick Tosches remarked that when he first interviewed the singer in April 1976, one could readily believe the accounts by those who had known him for years, that he had not changed much at all and that he had been impervious to fame and fortune. In an unusually unguarded self-appraisal in 1981, the singer told Mark Rose of The Village Voice, "I don't show a lot of affection. I have probably been a very unliked person among family, like somebody who was heartless. I saved it all for the songs. I didn't know you were supposed to show that love person to person. I guess I always wanted to, but I didn't know how. The only way I could would be to do it in a song." Years later he commented to the Christian Broadcasting Network's Scott Ross, "I think you're mad at yourself. I think that you're saying to yourself you don't deserve this. You don't deserve those fans. You don't deserve making this money. And you're mad at yourself. And you beat up on yourself by drinking and losing friends that won't put up with that. It's just one terrible big mess you make out of your life." In 1982, Jones recorded the album A Taste of Yesterday's Wine with Merle Haggard. While the album cover was shocking, with Jones looking gaunt and wasted, his singing was flawless. His run of hits also continued in the early 1980s, with the singer charting I'm Not Ready Yet, Say Me Lay Me, Still Doing Time, Tennessee Whiskey, We Didn't See a Thing, and I Always Get Lucky With You, which was Jones' last #1 in 1984. In 1981, Jones met Nancy Sepulvado, a 34-year-old Dvorka copyrightee from Mansfield, Louisiana. Sepulvado's positive impact on Jones' life and career cannot be overestimated. She eventually cleaned up his finances, kept him away from his drug dealers, and managed his career. Jones always gave her complete credit for saving his life. Nancy, who did not drink, explained to Nick Tosches in 1994, "He was drinking but he was fun to be around. It wasn't love at first sight or anything like that. But I saw what a good person he was, deep down, and I couldn't help caring about him." Jones managed to quit cocaine but went on a drunken rampage in Alabama in the fall of 1983 and was once again straitjacketed and committed to Hillcrest Psychiatric Hospital suffering from malnutrition and delusions. But by this time, physically and emotionally exhausted, he really did want to quit drinking. In March 1984 in Birmingham, Alabama, at the age of 52, Jones performed his first Stone Cold Sober show since the early 70s. "All my life it seems like I've been running from something," he told the United Press International in June. "If I knew what it was, maybe I could run in the right direction. But I always seem to end up going the other way." Jones began making up many of the dates he had missed, playing them for free to pay back promoters, and began opening his concerts with No Show Jones, a song he had written with Glenn Martin that poked fun at himself and other country singers. Jones always stressed that he was not proud of the way he treated loved ones and friends over the years and was ashamed of disappointing his fans when he missed shows, telling Billboard in 2006 that "I know it hurt my fans in a way and I've always been sad about that, it really bothered me for a long time." Mostly sober for the rest of the 1980s, Jones consistently released albums with Cheryl producing, including Shine On, Jones Country, You've Still Got a Place in My Heart, Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes, Wine-Colored Roses, Too Wild Too Long and One Woman Man. Jones' video for his 1985 hit, Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes, won the CMA Award for Video of the Year. Later years and death. In 1990, Jones released his last proper studio album on Epic, You Have to Be Here With Me. Although the album featured several stirring performances, including the lead single Hell Stays Open All Night Long, and the Roger Miller penned title song, the single bombed and Jones made the switch to MCA, ending his relationship with Cheryl and what was now Sony Music after 19 years. His first album with MCA, And Along Came Jones, was released in 1991 and, backed by MCA's powerful promotion team and producer Carl Laning, the album sold better than his previous one had. However, two singles, You Couldn't Get the Picture, and She Loved a Lot in Her Time, did not crack the top 30 on the charts as Jones lost favor with country radio as the format was altered radically during the early 1990s. His last album to have significant radio airplay was 1992's Walls Can Fall, which featured the novelty song Finally Friday, and I Don't Need Your Rockin' Chair, a testament to his continued vivaciousness in old age. Despite the loss of radio airplay, Jones continued to record and tour throughout the 1990s and was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame by Randy Travis in 1992. In 1996, Jones released his autobiography I Live to Tell It All with Tom Carter, and the irony of his long career was not lost on him, with the singer writing in its preface, I also know that a lot of my show business peers are going to be angry after reading this book. So many have worked so hard to maintain their careers. I never took my career seriously, and yet it's flourishing." He also pulled no punches about his disappointment in the direction country music had taken, devoting a full chapter to the changes in the country music scene of the 1990s that saw him removed from radio playlists in favor of a younger generation of pop-influenced country stars. Despite his absence from the country charts during this time, latter-day country superstars such as Garth Brooks, Randy Travis, Alan Jackson, and many others often pay tribute to Jones while expressing their love and respect for his legacy as a true country legend who paved the way for their own success. On February 17, 1998, the Nashville network premiered a group of television specials called The George Jones Show, with Jones as host. The program featured informal chats with Jones holding court with country's biggest stars old and new and, of course, music. Guests included Loretta Lynn, Trace Adkins, Johnny Paycheck, Lorrie Morgan, Merle Haggard, Billy Ray Cyrus, Tim McGraw, Faith Hill, Charlie Pride, Bobby Bare, Patty Loveless and Waylon Jennings, among others. While Jones remained committed to pure country, he worked with the top producers and musicians of the day and the quality of his work remained high. Some significant performances include I Must Have Done Something Bad, Wild Irish Rose, Billy Be Bad, 1,000 Times a Day, When the Last Curtain Falls, and the novelty High-Tech Redneck. Jones' most popular song in his later years was Choices, the first single from his 1999 studio album Cold Hard Truth. A video was also made for the song and Jones won another Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The song was at the center of controversy when the Country Music Association invited Jones to perform it on the awards show, but required that he perform an abridged version. Jones refused and did not attend the show. Alan Jackson was disappointed with the association's decision and halfway through his own performance during the show he signaled to his band and played part of Jones' song in protest. On March 6, 1999, Jones was involved in an accident when he crashed his sport utility vehicle near his home. He was rushed to the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where he was released 2 weeks later. In May of that year, Jones pleaded guilty to drunk driving charges related to the accident. The crash was a significant turning point, as he explained to Billboard in 2006. "When I had that wreck I made up my mind, it put the fear of God in me. No more smoking, no more drinking. I didn't have to have no help, I made up my mind to quit. I don't crave it." After the accident, Jones went on to release the Gospel Collection in 2003, which Billy Sherrill came out of retirement to produce. He appeared at a televised Johnny Cash memorial concert in 2003, singing Big River with Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson. In 2008, Jones received the Kennedy Center honor along with Pete Townshend and Roger Daltrey of The Who, Barbra Streisand, Morgan Freeman and Twyla Tharp. President George W. Bush disclosed that he had many of Jones' songs on his iPod. Jones also served as judge in 2008 for the 8th Annual Independent Music Awards to support independent artists' careers, and Rolling Stone named him number 43 in their 100 Greatest Singers of All Time issue. An album titled Hits I Missed and One I Didn't, in which he covered hits he had passed on as well as a remake of his own He Stopped Loving Her Today, would be released as his final studio album. In 2012, Jones received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. On March 29, 2012, Jones was hospitalized with an upper respiratory infection. Months later, on May 21, Jones was hospitalized again for his infection and was released 5 days later. On August 14, 2012, Jones announced his farewell tour, the Grand Tour, with scheduled stops at 60 cities. His final concert was held in Knoxville at the Knoxville City Coliseum on April 6, 2013. Jones was scheduled to perform his final concert at the Bridgestone Arena on November 22, 2013. However, on April 18, 2013, Jones was admitted to Vanderbilt University Medical Center for a slight fever and irregular blood pressure. His concerts in Alabama and Salem were postponed as a result. While there, Jones died in the early morning hours of April 26, 2013, aged 81, from hypoxic respiratory failure. Former First Lady Laura Bush was among those eulogizing Jones at his funeral on May 2, 2013. Other speakers were Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam, news personality Bob Schieffer, and country singers Barbara Mandrell and Kenny Chesney. Alan Jackson, Kid Rock, Ronnie Milsap, Randy Travis, Vince Gill, Patti Loveless, Travis Tritt, the Oak Ridge Boys, Charlie Daniels, Inanna and Brad Paisley provided musical tributes. The service was broadcast live on CMT, GAC, RFD-TV, the Nashville Network and Family Net as well as Nashville stations. Sirius XM and WSM 650 AM, home of the Grand Ole Opry, broadcast the event on the radio. The family has asked that contributions be made to the Grand Ole Opry Trust Fund or to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. Jones' death made headlines all over the world. Many country stations abandoned or modified their playlists and played his songs throughout the day. The week after Jones's death, He Stopped Loving Her Today re-entered the Hot Country Songs at number 21. Legacy: Jones tirelessly defended the integrity of country music, telling Billboard in 2006, "It's never been for love of money. I thank God for it because it makes me a living. But I sing because I love it, not because of the dollar signs." Jones also went out of his way to promote younger country singers that he felt were as passionate about the music as he was. "Everybody knows he's a great singer," Alan Jackson stated in 1995, "but what I like most about George is that when you meet him, he is like some LA guy that works down at the gas station." Even though he's a legend, Jones' influence as a singer is beyond question. Shortly after his death, Andrew Mueller wrote in Uncut, "He was one of the finest interpretive singers who ever lifted a microphone. There cannot be a single country songwriter of the last 50-odd years who has not wondered what it might be like to hear their words sung by that voice." In 1994, country music historian Colin Escott pronounced, "Contemporary country music is virtually founded on reverence for George Jones. Walk through a room of country singers and conduct a quick poll, George nearly always tops it." In the wake of Jones's death, Merle Haggard pronounced in Rolling Stone, "His voice was like a Stradivarius violin, one of the greatest instruments ever made." In the liner notes to Essential George Jones, "The spirit of country Rich Kinsel confirms, Jones sings of people and stories that are achingly human. He can turn a ballad into a catharsis by wringing every possible emotion from it, making it a primal, strangled cry of anguish." In a quote that appeared on the sleeve of Jones' 1976 album Memories of Us, Emila Harris wrote, "When you hear George Jones sing, you are hearing a man who takes a song and makes it a work of art, always." In Say My Me, several country music stars offer similar thoughts. Johnny Cash, "When people ask me who my favorite country singer is, I say, you mean besides George Jones?" Randy Travis, "It sounds like he's lived every minute of every word that he sings and there's very few people who can do that." Tom T. Hall, "It was always Jones who got the message across just right." And Roy Acuff, "I'd give anything if I could sing like George Jones." In the same documentary, producer Billy Sherrill states, "All I did was change the instrumentation around him. I don't think he's changed at all." Jones' dedication to what he called hardcore country music remained resolute until the day he died. Influence beyond country music: unlike some of his contemporaries, Jones stuck with country music with a vengeance. Ironically, without even trying, Jones' unabashed loyalty to strictly country arrangements attracted the admiration of musicians and songwriters from a wide range of genres. In an often quoted tribute, Frank Sinatra called Jones the second-best singer in America. In a Rolling Stone interview in 1969, Bob Dylan was asked what he thought was the best song released in the previous year and he replied, "George Jones had one called Small Town Laboring Man." In his autobiography Chronicles, Dylan states that in the early 1960s he was largely unimpressed by what he heard on the radio and admits outside of maybe George Jones, one didn't listen to country music either. Country rock pioneer Graham Parsons was an avid George Jones fan and covered Jones' song That's All It Took on his first solo album. In the documentary Graham Parsons, Fallen Angel, Pamela Des Barres recalls seeing Parsons singing Jones' song She Once Lived Here at an empty Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. It was my peak moment, not sitting on Jimmy Page's amp. That was my peak moment. Parsons reignited Keith Richards' interest in country music in the early 70s, and after Jones' death in 2013 the guitarist wrote, "He possessed the most touching voice, the most expressive ways of projecting that beautiful instrument of anyone I can call to mind. You heard his heart in every note he sang." Richards recorded Say It's Not You with Jones for the Bradley Barnes sessions in 1994 and recalls in his autobiography hearing him sing for the first time when the Rolling Stones and Jones were on the same show in Texas in 1964. They trailed and with Tumbleweed following them, as if Tumbleweed was their pet. Dust all over the place, a bunch of cowboys. But when George got up, we went whoa, there's a master up there. In an interview for the 1989 Rolling Stones documentary 25x5, Mick Jagger also cites Jones as one of his favorite country singers. John Prine mentions Jones in his song Jesus the Missing Years. Jones fan Elvis Costello had a surprise hit in the UK when he covered A Good Year for the Roses in 1981. Elliott Smith told an interviewer about his idea of heaven, George Jones would be singing all the time. It would be like New York in reverse, people would be nice to each other for no reason at all, and it would smell good. In a 2001 interview with Mark Binnelly from Rolling Stone, Leonard Cohen asked, "Have you heard George Jones' last record Cold Hard Truth? I love to hear an old guy lay out his situation. He has the best voice in America." The day Jones died, Cohen performed Choices on stage in Winnipeg, Canada as a tribute to the country legend. In 2013, Robbie Robertson told Uncut, "He was the Ray Charles of country music, the one who could make you cry with his voice. We wouldn't listen to country music, the guys in the band, but we'd listen to George Jones." James Taylor, who wrote Bartender's Blues with Jones in mind and sang background vocals with him on the recording, told Rolling Stone, "He sounds like a steel guitar. It's the way he blends notes, the way he comes up to them, the way he crescendos and decrescendos. The dynamic of it is very tight and very controlled, it's like carving with the voice." Other disparate artists who recorded with Jones include Dennis LeCorrier and Ray Sawyer of Dr. Hook, Mark Knopfler, the Staples Singers, Leon Russell, B.B. King and Linda Ronstadt. In 1995, Burt Reynolds wrote, "He is to country music what Spencer Tracy is to movies." On the day of his death, Nathan Followell of the alternative rock band Kings of Leon tweeted, "R.I.P., George Jones, you'll be sorely missed. One of the all-time greats." Duets. Jones was one of the greatest harmony singers in country music and released many duets over the course of his long career. While his songs with Tammy Wynette are his most celebrated, Jones claimed in his autobiography that he felt his duets with Melba Montgomery were his best. Jones also recorded duet albums with Gene Pitney and his former bass player Johnny Paycheck. George's record with Paycheck, 1980's Double Trouble, is one of his most atypical records and features him giving credible performances on numbers like Maybelline, You Better Move On, and Proud Mary. Jones also recorded the duet albums My Very Special Guests, Lady's Choice, Friends in High Places, The Bradley Barnes Sessions, God's Country, George Jones and Friends, a second album with Merle Haggard called Kicking Out the Footlights Again and Burn Your Playhouse Down. Some notable duets Jones recorded include number 1 country hits, White Lightning, Tender Years, She Thinks I Still Care, Walk Through This World With Me, We're Gonna Hold On, The Grand Tour, The Door, Golden Ring, Near You, He Stopped Loving Her Today, I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool, Still Doin' Time, Yesterday's Wine, I Always Get Lucky With You. Personal life. Jones married his first wife, Dorothy Bonvillian, in 1950 and had one daughter, Susan. In 1989, Jones admitted in the Same Old Me retrospective, "I had my first daughter by my first wife and, to be honest with you, that's the main reason I went into the service, because I couldn't pay my child support." He had 2 sons, Jeffrey and Brian, with his second wife Shirley. He suffered a strained relationship with them, no doubt in part because of his extended absences, drinking and erratic personal behavior. In 2008, Jones recorded You and Me and Time with his daughter by Tammy, Tamala Georgette. In 2011, Georgette published a book, The Three of Us, Understanding My Mother, Finding My Father, and Growing Up with George and Tammy. Jones was reportedly unhappy about the book. Discography. See also: Academy of Country Music, List of country musicians, Country Music Association, List of best-selling music artists, inductees of the Country Music Hall of Fame, references. Further reading: I Live to Tell It All, George Jones with Tom Carter, Dell Publishing, 1997, ISBN 0-440-22373-3. In the Country of Country, A Journey to the Roots of American Music, Nicholas Doidoff, Vintage Books, 1998, ISBN 0-375-70082-X. Country Music USA, Bill C. Malone, University of Texas Press, 1985, ISBN 0-292-71096-8. Joel Hitchcock's Top Country Songs, 1944-2005, Record Research, Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, 2005, ISBN 0-89820-165-9. External links: Official website, Bandit Records. George Jones, full list of inductees, Country Music Hall of Fame.